When we think of pirates, most of us picture the swaggering adventurers of the Caribbean, men in flamboyant coats, pistols at their hips, and the Jolly Roger waving high above their ships. It's an image shaped by centuries of myth, books, and Hollywood fantasy. The story begins in the late 15th century, when European explorers discovered the Americas. Spain quickly seized the opportunity, founding colonies across the Caribbean and mainland. Soon, ships loaded with silver, gold, sugar, and tobacco sailed regularly across the Atlantic, fueling Spain's growing empire. But with great wealth came great envy. By the mid-1500s, Europe was divided, not just by politics but by faith. Spain, loyal to the Catholic Church, became the superpower of the age. Meanwhile, Protestant nations like England and the Netherlands broke away, determined to challenge Spain's dominance and share in her riches. Rather than wage endless war in Europe, they turned their eyes west, to the Caribbean and to Spain's treasure fleets. This gave rise to the privateers, state-sanctioned pirates armed with a legal letter of marque. In the name of their kings, they raided Spanish ships, plundered ports, and shared their loot with the crown. The French came first, men like Jean Fleury and François Leclerc. Then came the English, led by figures who would become legends: Sir Francis Drake, Sir Richard Hawkins, Sir Walter Raleigh. But even their boldest attacks had limits. They struck fast, took what they could, and sailed home to Europe before the Spanish could respond. To counter the threat, Spain armed its treasure fleets with warships, vast floating fortresses guarding the wealth of an empire. For a time, the seas grew quieter. But the age of piracy was far from over. By the early 1600s, French, English, and Dutch settlers had begun to carve out new colonies on the Caribbean's outer edges. On the island of Hispaniola, small groups of Frenchmen survived by hunting wild animals and smoking their meat over wooden racks, a method called boucan. From this, they earned their name, buccaneers, literally the men who smoke meat. To the Spanish, they were trespassers, and soon troops were sent to wipe them out. The survivors fled to the nearby island of Tortuga, a rocky refuge that would soon become the most infamous pirate haven in the Caribbean. By 1630, the buccaneers of Tortuga had turned from hunters to pirates, preying on Spanish ships, raiding coastal towns, and building a reputation for vengeance and greed. In 1640, a French engineer named Jean Levasseur fortified the island with a massive stronghold, Fort de Roche. Under its protection, pirates of every nation found safe harbor. In exchange, Levasseur took a small share of their spoils. Tortuga had become the first true pirate port. They called themselves the Brethren of the Coast, a brotherhood of thieves united by hatred for Spain and by their own strange sense of justice. Before each voyage, they drafted written codes, called articles, defining every man's share of treasure, discipline, and duty. Captains could be voted out, punishments were clear, and loot was divided fairly among the crew. For all their brutality, pirates were among the most democratic men of their time. Spain could no longer ignore the threat. In 1654, Spanish forces attacked Tortuga, laying siege for 9 days before forcing the pirates to surrender. But their victory was short-lived. The buccaneers always returned, stronger, bolder, and more vengeful than before. By 1660, the pirates of Tortuga were mostly French and declared the island for France. They built a new fortress, Fort Blondel, and appointed a governor loyal to the French crown. Meanwhile, to the south, the English had captured Jamaica, and its Port-au-Port Royal soon grew into the richest, wildest city in the New World. Together, Tortuga and Port Royal became the twin hearts of Caribbean piracy, where fortunes were made, lives were lost, and legends were born. These were the real pirates of the Caribbean, men driven by hunger, revenge, and opportunity. Not heroes, not villains, but survivors of a brutal age. Their time would not last, but their legend would. And from the ashes of their ships, the myth of the golden age of piracy would rise and never truly fade away. The birth of piracy. After the discovery of the Americas in the late 15th century, Spain built a vast empire, drawing immense wealth from the New World. Gold, silver, sugar, and tobacco flowed to Europe, enriching the Spanish crown. But their growing power and wealth also drew envy and hostility from rival nations. By the mid-1500s, England, France, and the Netherlands had their own ambitions. Unable to challenge Spain directly in Europe, they turned to the high seas. Armed with royal permission called letters of marque, state-sanctioned raiders, privateers, set out to plunder Spanish treasure fleets and sack their colonies. These men, like France's Francois Leclerc and England's Sir Francis Drake, became heroes at home and scourges abroad, striking fear into the Spanish Main. Rise of the Buccaneers. By the early 1600s, settlers from France, England, and the Netherlands began colonizing the Caribbean's outer islands. On the wild northern shores of Hispaniola, French hunters survived by smoking meat over wooden frames known as boucans. From this, they earned their name, the Buccaneers. But Spanish authorities viewed them as trespassers and drove them off. They fled to nearby Tortuga, where in exile, hunger turned to hatred and hatred to piracy. Under the protection of a new fort built by engineer Jean de Vasseur in 1640, Tortuga became the first true pirate haven, a place where men of all nations united against Spain under a single banner, the Brethren of the Coast. Their code was simple but revolutionary. Elected captains, shared spoils, and strict discipline. Disobedience meant flogging, betrayal meant death, or worse, being marooned on a deserted island with only a pistol and a bottle of water. Port Royal, City of Sin. As the Buccaneers grew bolder, their raids reached as far as Panama. Among them was the infamous Henry Morgan, who in 1671 led his men across the deadly jungles of the Darien Gap, capturing Panama City itself. His victories made Port Royal, Jamaica, a city of immense wealth and unparalleled vice. They called it the wickedest city on earth. Here, pirates spent fortunes in a single night, drowning their spoils in rum and pleasure. But their paradise was short-lived. On June 7, 1692, a massive earthquake struck Port Royal, sinking half the city beneath the waves, taking thousands with it. The age of buccaneers was ending. The fall of the Buccaneers. By the late 1600s, peace with Spain reduced the need for privateers. Many pirates returned to Europe, became planters, or joined national navies. Anti-piracy laws spread, and the great pirate fortresses fell silent. But the spirit of rebellion refused to die. It merely sailed elsewhere. The Pirate Republic. By the early 1700s, a new breed of pirate had emerged. When war ended in 1714, thousands of out-of-work sailors, privateers, and freed slaves turned to piracy once more. Their base, Nassau, in the Bahamas, a lawless haven known as the Pirate Republic. Here, democracy ruled the seas. Captains were chosen by vote. Treasure was shared equally, regardless of color or class. Among them were legends whose names echo through history: Calico Jack Rackham and Bonnie, Mary Red, Charles Vane, Black Sam Bellamy, and the most feared of all, Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. With fire in his beard and pistols across his chest, Blackbeard became the face of piracy, both terrifying and magnetic. The Great Pirate Hunt. But the golden age of piracy couldn't last. By 1717, King George I of Britain offered a royal pardon to any pirate who surrendered. Those who refused would face the hangman's noose. To enforce it, he sent Governor Woodes Rogers to Nassau, backed by warships and pirate hunters. Many of them reformed pirates themselves. Rogers' arrival marked the beginning of the end. One by one, the great pirates were captured and executed. Calico Jack in 1720, Charles Vane in 1721, and Blackbeard, who met his bloody end in battle off the coast of North Carolina. By 1726, more than 500 pirates had been hanged. The once free seas of the Caribbean fell silent. The legacy of the pirates. And yet, the legend of the pirates never died. Though myths of parrots, eye patches, and walking the plank came later, their real legacy lay not in their violence, but in their spirit. They lived by a code of equality and brotherhood, where every man, rich or poor, black or white, had an equal share and an equal voice. In their defiance of kings and empires, they embodied something that would outlast them all: the pursuit of freedom on the open sea. This is the true legacy of the real pirates of the Caribbean.